My name is Elena Martinez. I'm 34 years old, and I'm standing alone in a funeral home that should have been filled with family and friends. My husband Marcus died 3 days ago in a car accident, and as I look around at the empty chairs, the silence is deafening. Not one person from my family showed up. Not my parents, not my sister, not even my childhood best friend Sarah, who promised she'd always be there. The funeral director keeps glancing at me with pity, probably wondering where everyone is. What they don't know is that this betrayal runs deeper than they could ever imagine, and the truth behind their absence will change everything. Before we dive into this story of family betrayal and the shocking revenge that followed, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? If you're ready for a tale that'll make you question everything about family loyalty, hit that like button and subscribe because trust me, you won't see this twist coming. The drama that unfolded after this funeral will leave you speechless, so let's get started. 3 months before Marcus died, my world seemed perfect. We'd been married for 8 years, living in a beautiful house in suburban Denver that we'd saved for years to buy. Marcus worked as an architect, and I ran a small but successful catering business from home. We were trying for our second child. Our daughter Lily was 5 and desperately wanted a sibling. My relationship with my family had always been complicated, but I thought we'd moved past the old tensions. My parents, Robert and Patricia Chin, were traditional immigrants who'd built a successful restaurant chain from nothing. They'd always been disappointed that I chose catering over joining the family business, but they seemed to accept my choices when I married Marcus. My younger sister Jessica worked as the operations manager for their restaurants and was clearly the favorite child, though they tried to hide it. Sarah Kim had been my best friend since college. We'd been through everything together: breakups, career changes, family drama. She was Lily's godmother and had been my maid of honor. I trusted her completely, which made what happened next so much more devastating. The first crack in my perfect world appeared during Lily's 5th birthday party. I'd spent weeks planning the perfect celebration in our backyard, complete with a princess theme and homemade cake. My parents came, but they seemed distracted and kept whispering to each other. Jessica arrived late and spent most of the time on her phone. Sarah was there, but she kept making excuses to leave early. "Is everything okay?" I asked my mother as she helped me clean up afterward. She exchanged a look with my father that I couldn't read. "Everything's fine, Elena. We're just busy with a new restaurant location." But something felt off. The way they avoided eye contact, the hushed conversations that stopped when I entered the room, the feeling that I was missing something important. Marcus noticed it too. "Your family's acting weird," he said that night as we got ready for bed. "Even Sarah seems different lately." I brushed off his concerns, but deep down, I felt it too. There was an undercurrent of tension that I couldn't identify, like everyone knew something I didn't. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the stress of running my business and raising Lily was making me imagine things. The second sign came 2 weeks later when I stopped by my parents' original restaurant unannounced. I walked in through the back entrance, the way I had countless times growing up, and heard voices from the office. My parents were talking to someone, and I was about to announce myself when I heard my name. "Elena can never know about this," my mother was saying. "It would destroy her." "She's going to find out eventually," came Jessica's voice. "These things always come out." "Not if we're careful," my father replied. "She trusts us completely. She has no reason to suspect anything." I froze in the hallway, my heart pounding. What couldn't I know? What would destroy me? I strained to hear more, but they'd moved on to discussing supply orders. I slipped out the way I came, my mind racing with possibilities. That night, I couldn't sleep. Marcus found me in the kitchen at 2 a.m., staring into a cup of cold coffee. "What's wrong?" he asked, sitting beside me at our small breakfast table. I told him what I'd overheard, and he frowned. "That's strange. Have you asked them directly?" "How can I?" "Hey, Mom, what's this thing that would destroy me if I found out about it?" I shook my head. "They'd just deny it anyway." Marcus took my hand. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe they're planning a surprise for you. I wanted to believe him, but the knot in my stomach told me otherwise. Over the next few weeks, I started paying closer attention to my family's behavior. I noticed how conversations would shift when I joined them, how my parents and Jessica would share meaningful looks, how Sarah would quickly change the subject when I brought up certain topics. The breaking point came during our family's monthly dinner at my parents' house. It was a tradition we'd maintained for years, even through the busiest times. But this dinner felt different from the moment I walked in. The atmosphere was tense, and everyone seemed on edge. "How's the catering business?" my father asked, but his tone was off, like he was asking out of obligation rather than genuine interest. "It's great, actually. I just booked 3 weddings for next month," I replied, watching his reaction carefully. He nodded, but I caught him exchanging another one of those looks with my mother. Jessica was unusually quiet, picking at her food instead of dominating the conversation like she usually did. Sarah, who'd been coming to these dinners for years, seemed uncomfortable and kept checking her phone. "Is there something going on that I should know about?" I finally asked, setting down my chopsticks. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother forced a smile. "What do you mean, honey? Everyone's been acting strange lately. You're all treating me like I'm made of glass, or like I'm not supposed to know something important." "You're imagining things," Jessica said quickly, too quickly. "We're just stressed about the business." But I could see the lie in her eyes, the same way I'd been able to tell when she was lying as children. Something was definitely wrong, and they were all in on it except me. That was the night I decided to find out the truth, no matter what it cost me. I had no idea that the discovery I was about to make would lead to the complete destruction of my family relationships and, ultimately, to the most satisfying revenge I could have ever imagined. The next morning, I dropped Lily off at school, and instead of heading home to prep for a client meeting, I drove to the public library. I needed a neutral space to think and plan my investigation. If my family was hiding something from me, I was going to find out what it was. I started with what I knew. The conversations had been about me specifically, something that would destroy me if I found out. It involved my parents, Jessica, and apparently Sarah knew about it too. The secrecy had been going on for at least a few weeks, possibly longer, and I'd only just started noticing because they were getting sloppy about hiding it. My first instinct was financial. Maybe there were problems with the family business that they didn't want to worry me about. But that didn't make sense. Why would business problems destroy me personally? Unless they owed me money or had used money that was meant for me somehow. I thought about my inheritance. My maternal grandmother had left me a substantial sum when she died 5 years ago, but my parents had insisted on managing it for me, claiming they could get better returns through their business investments. I'd trusted them completely and rarely asked about it. Maybe something had happened to that money. That afternoon, I called the family accountant, Mr. Thompson, who'd been handling our finances for 20 years. "Elena, how lovely to hear from you," he said warmly. "How can I help you today?" "I wanted to check on my grandmother's inheritance. Just, see how the investments are doing." There was a pause. "Oh, well, you need to speak with your parents about that. They handle all those details. But you manage the accounts, right? Surely you can give me a basic update on my own money." Another pause, longer this time. "Elena, I think there might be some confusion. Perhaps you should discuss this with your parents directly." The evasiveness in his tone sent chills down my spine. "Mr. Thompson, is my money still there?" I really think you should talk to your parents, Elena. I'm sorry, but I can't discuss this without their authorization." I hung up feeling sick. 20 years of trust, and he couldn't even tell me about my own inheritance without my parents' permission? Something was very wrong. That evening, I waited until Marcus put Lily to bed before confronting him with my suspicions. "I think they stole my inheritance," I said without preamble. Marcus looked up from his laptop. "That's a serious accusation, Elle. Are you sure?" I told him about the accountant's evasiveness, and his expression grew grave. "We should look into this properly. Do you have any documentation about the inheritance?" We spent the next hour going through our files. I found the original will and the death certificate, but very little documentation about where the money had gone afterward. My parents had handled everything, and I'd been dealing with grief and planning my wedding at the time, so I'd let them take care of the details. We need to hire our own accountant, Marcus said. Someone who can trace where this money went. The next day, I contacted Margaret Walsh, a forensic accountant recommended by our lawyer. She was a sharp woman in her 50s who specialized in financial fraud cases. When I explained the situation, she nodded knowingly. Family financial abuse is more common than people think, she said. Let me see what I can find. While Margaret worked on tracing the inheritance, I decided to investigate the other aspects of my family's strange behavior. I started paying attention to their schedules, their conversations, their habits. I became a detective in my own family. I noticed that Jessica had been working longer hours lately, often staying at the restaurant until late at night. When I asked her about it, she claimed they were preparing for the new location, but when I drove by the restaurant after 9 p.m., her car wasn't there. Where was she going? I also noticed that Sarah had been canceling our regular coffee dates, claiming she was too busy with work. But when I checked her social media, she was posting photos of herself at various places around town during our usual meeting times. She was definitely avoiding me, but why? The most disturbing discovery came when I decided to follow Jessica one evening. I felt terrible doing it, like I was violating some sacred trust, but I needed answers. I parked down the street from the restaurant and waited for her to leave. At 7:30 p.m., she came out of the restaurant, but instead of heading home, she drove across town to an upscale apartment complex I'd never seen before. She parked and went inside Building C, staying for over 2 hours. I looked up the address when I got home. The apartment complex was expensive, the kind of place that would cost at least $3,000 a month. Jessica lived with my parents to save money, so why was she spending her evenings at a luxury apartment complex? The pieces of the puzzle were starting to form a picture, but it was one I didn't want to see. My family's wealth, their expensive lifestyle, the new restaurant locations. Where was all this money coming from if not from legitimate business growth? 3 days later, Margaret called with her preliminary findings. Elena, I need you to sit down, she said. I've traced your grandmother's inheritance, and you're not going to like what I found. Just tell me, I said, my knuckles white as I gripped the phone. The money was initially deposited into a joint account with your parents as trustees. Over the course of 2 years, it was gradually transferred into various business accounts for your family's restaurants. But here's the thing, those transfers were made to cover personal expenses and luxury purchases, not legitimate business investments. My legs gave out, and I sank into a chair. How much? The original inheritance was $280,000. There's currently $12,000 left in the account. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. $268,000. My grandmother's life savings, meant to secure my future, had been stolen by the people I trusted most. But Margaret wasn't done. Elena, there's more. I found evidence of other irregularities. It looks like your parents have been using business accounts to fund personal expenses for years. The new restaurant locations? They're not profitable. In fact, the business is in serious debt. Are you saying they're broke? Worse. They've been running an elaborate shell game, moving money between accounts to hide their financial problems. The lifestyle you've been seeing, the expensive cars, the renovations to their house, Jessica's designer clothes, it's all been funded by borrowed money and, I suspect, your inheritance. I hung up and sat in stunned silence. My entire family had been living a lie, funded by money that was rightfully mine. But this still didn't explain the secrecy around me specifically, or why Sarah was involved. That's when I remembered the apartment complex Jessica had visited. I pulled out my laptop and started researching the building, looking through rental listings and resident directories. And there, in a penthouse unit that cost $4,500 a month, I found a name that made my blood run cold. Marcus Martinez. My husband had a secret apartment that cost more than our monthly mortgage. An apartment he'd never mentioned to me. An apartment that my sister was apparently visiting regularly. As the implications hit me, I felt like the ground was crumbling beneath my feet. The financial betrayal was just the beginning. My family's secret was so much worse than I'd imagined, and it was about to destroy not just my trust in them, but my entire life. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred together. Marcus Chun Martinez. There was no doubt. He'd hyphenated his last name when we got married, something that had touched me deeply at the time. But why did he have a secret apartment? And why was my sister visiting him there? My hands shook as I closed the laptop. I needed to think rationally, but my mind was spinning with terrible possibilities. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. Maybe he was planning a surprise for me, or maybe he was helping Jessica with something. But deep down, I knew I was grasping at straws. I called in sick to cancel my client meetings and spent the day pacing around the house like a caged animal. When Marcus came home that evening, I studied his face, looking for signs of guilt or deception. He seemed normal, tired from work, affectionate with Lily, asking about my day as he always did. "How was your day, babe?" he asked, kissing my forehead as I stirred pasta sauce at the stove. "Fine," I managed, though my voice sounded strange even to me. "How was yours?" "Long. We're behind on the Morrison project, so I had to stay late to catch up." Another lie. I'd called his office at 6 p.m., and his assistant had told me he'd left at 4:30. Where had he really been? The apartment? With my sister? That night, after Lily went to bed, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to confront them. Not Marcus, not yet. But Jessica. I was going to get the truth from her first. I waited until the next evening when I knew she'd be at the restaurant. I called ahead to make sure she was there, then drove over, my heart pounding with each mile. I found her in the office, exactly where I expected. "Elena." She looked up from her computer, and I caught a flash of something in her eyes. Guilt? Fear? "What are you doing here so late?" "We need to talk," I said, closing the office door behind me. "About what you've all been hiding from me." Her face went pale. "I don't know what you mean." "I hired a forensic accountant, Jessica. I know about my inheritance. I know about the business debt. I know about the apartment." The last words hung in the air between us, and I watched as my sister's carefully constructed facade finally crumbled. "Elena, I can explain." "You've been stealing from me for years," I said, my voice deadly calm. "You and Mom and Dad took my grandmother's money and spent it on your lifestyle." "But that's not even the worst part, is it?" Jessica's eyes filled with tears, but I felt no sympathy for her. "Please, let me explain." "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." "Tell me why my husband has a secret apartment that you visit regularly." She broke down completely then, sobbing into her hands. "I'm so sorry, Elena. I never wanted it to happen this way. I never wanted to hurt you." "Just tell me the truth," I said, though I was pretty sure I already knew what she was going to say. "It started 2 years ago," she whispered. "Marcus and we were working on the books together, trying to help Mom and Dad with their financial problems. We spent a lot of time together, and one thing led to another. Even though I'd suspected it, hearing the words out loud felt like a physical blow. You're having an affair with my husband." She nodded, unable to look at me. "We tried to stop it. So many times we tried to end it. But we fell in love, Elena. I know that sounds horrible, but it's true." I felt like I was watching this conversation happen to someone else. My sister, who I'd protected and defended our entire lives, had been sleeping with my husband for 2 years. 2 years of lies, 2 years of secret meetings, 2 years of them laughing at how naive and trusting I was. "The apartment," I managed to say. "Marcus got it 6 months ago. We were tired of sneaking around, finding random places to meet. He said it would be safer this way. Safer for them. More dangerous for me, because it meant their affair had become serious enough to require a permanent space." "Does everyone know?" Jessica's silence was answer enough. "My parents know. Sarah knows. Everyone knows except me. We were going to tell you, she said desperately. After the holidays, we were going to figure out how to handle everything. Handle everything? You mean like how Marcus was going to divorce me and move in with you officially? Her nod was barely perceptible, but it was enough to confirm my worst fears. And my inheritance money? Did that pay for your love nest? Some of it, she admitted. Marcus needed help with the down payment and the first few months' rent. We were going to pay it back once everything was settled. I laughed, a harsh sound that made her flinch. With what money? The business is bankrupt, Jessica. There is no money to pay me back with. That's when the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. You're planning to take everything, aren't you? The house, my catering business, everything Marcus and I built together. You've been working on this for 2 years, making sure you'd get it all when you finally decided to destroy my life. It's not like that. Get out, I said quietly. Elena, please. Get out. I screamed, and she scrambled to gather her things and flee. I sat alone in that office for an hour, staring at the walls that had surrounded my family's lies for years. My inheritance was gone. My husband was cheating with my sister. My parents had orchestrated the whole thing. My best friend had kept their secrets. But as I sat there in the ruins of my old life, something else was growing inside me. Not just hurt or betrayal, but a cold, calculating anger. They thought they'd won. They thought they'd successfully deceived me and would get away with stealing my money and my husband. They had no idea what they'd unleashed. I drove home that night with a new sense of purpose. I wasn't going to confront Marcus yet. I wasn't going to break down or beg or try to save my marriage. Instead, I was going to do something much more satisfying. I was going to destroy them all, just as thoroughly and methodically as they'd destroyed me. And I was going to make sure they never saw it coming. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook, planning my revenge with the same meticulous attention to detail I used for my most elaborate catering events. If my family wanted to play games, I'd show them what a real master strategist could do. First, I needed to secure my assets. Marcus didn't know that I knew about the affair, which gave me a significant advantage. I spent the early morning hours quietly gathering documents, bank statements, business records, property deeds, insurance policies. Everything I'd need to protect myself in the divorce that was inevitably coming. My catering business was entirely in my name, built with my own money and labor before I'd married Marcus. The house was trickier. We'd bought it together, but I'd put down the larger down payment using money I'd saved from my business. I had documentation to prove it. By 6 a.m., I had copies of everything stored in a safe deposit box that Marcus didn't know about. I'd also transferred half our joint savings into a separate account. Not enough to trigger any alerts, but enough to ensure I wouldn't be left with nothing when the truth came out. But this wasn't just about protecting myself financially. This was about justice. I called Margaret Walsh early that morning and asked her to dig deeper into my parents' finances. I want to know everything, I told her. Every fraudulent transaction, every misappropriated fund, every lie they've told to creditors and investors. Elena, are you planning legal action? She asked. Maybe. Right now, I just want the full picture. What Margaret found over the next few days was even worse than I'd imagined. My parents hadn't just stolen my inheritance. They'd been running a sophisticated financial fraud for years. They'd taken out loans using false business projections, inflated their assets on credit applications, and had been systematically draining money from the restaurant locations to fund their lifestyle. The new restaurant Jessica kept mentioning? It didn't exist. They'd been telling investors they were expanding while actually using the investment money to pay off debts and maintain their facade of success. This is criminal fraud, Margaret told me during our meeting. We're talking about federal charges if this gets reported to the authorities. I tucked that information away. It might come in handy later. Next, I hired a private investigator named David Chin, no relation to Marcus despite the name. I needed documented proof of the affair, not just Jessica's tearful confession. David was expensive but discreet, and within a week, he had photos, video surveillance, and detailed reports of Marcus and Jessica's activities. They met at the apartment 3 times a week. Marcus told me he was working late or meeting with clients during those times. They went out to dinner at expensive restaurants, took weekend trips together while I thought Marcus was at architecture conferences. The evidence was overwhelming and heartbreaking. But as I reviewed David's reports, I noticed something interesting. Sarah, my supposed best friend, wasn't just aware of the affair, she was actively facilitating it. She'd been providing alibis for Jessica, covering for her when my parents asked questions, even booking restaurant reservations for the lovers' dates. Sarah had betrayed me just as thoroughly as the rest of them. Looking at this growing mountain of evidence, I realized I had enough ammunition to destroy all of them. But I wanted to do it strategically, in a way that would have maximum impact and ensure they faced real consequences for their actions. That's when I remembered something Marcus had told me years ago about his biggest fear. He'd grown up poor, and his greatest anxiety was public humiliation related to money or status. He'd worked so hard to build his reputation as a successful architect, to be seen as respectable and trustworthy. Jessica was similar. She'd always been obsessed with appearances, with being seen as the successful daughter who helped run the family business. She posted constantly on social media about the restaurants, positioning herself as a successful businesswoman. My parents had built their entire identity around being the American dream success story, immigrants who'd built a restaurant empire through hard work and family values. And Sarah? She worked in public relations and was constantly networking, building her reputation in Denver's professional community. They'd all built their lives on carefully constructed images of success and respectability. What would happen if those images were destroyed publicly and dramatically? I started laying the groundwork for what I privately called the funeral plan, though I had no idea how prophetic that name would turn out to be. The beauty of my plan was that I wouldn't have to do most of the work myself. I would simply create the conditions for their lies to unravel publicly, in the most humiliating way possible. I began by scheduling a family meeting for the following month, ostensibly to discuss holiday plans. I sent a formal invitation to my parents, Jessica, and Sarah, suggesting we meet at the original restaurant after closing time to discuss important family business. They all agreed readily, probably relieved that I still seemed oblivious to their secrets. Meanwhile, I started documenting everything. I bought a small recording device and began capturing Marcus's lies about his whereabouts. I screenshot social media posts from Jessica and Sarah that contradicted what they were telling me in person. I gathered evidence of my parents' financial deceptions. Most importantly, I began reaching out to people in their professional and social circles. Not to tell them what was happening, not yet, but to plant seeds. I mentioned to Marcus's business partners that he seemed stressed lately, working strange hours. I told some of Jessica's friends that she seemed to be hiding something. I dropped hints to Sarah's colleagues that she'd been acting oddly secretive. I was creating a network of people who were already primed to believe the worst when the truth finally came out. But even as I planned their downfall, I struggled with moments of doubt. These were the people I'd loved most in the world. Was I going too far? Was revenge really worth destroying my entire family? Then I'd remember the empty funeral chairs, the years of lies, the stolen inheritance, and the cold calculation behind their betrayal. They hadn't just hurt me, they'd stolen my future, my security, my ability to trust anyone completely. No, I decided. They deserved everything that was coming to them. Now, I know some of you watching might be wondering if this level of revenge is justified. Have you ever been betrayed by the people you trusted most? Let me know in the comments how far you think is too far when it comes to family betrayal. And if you're invested in seeing how this all plays out, hit that like button, because trust me, you haven't seen anything yet. The way these dominoes fall is going to shock you just as much as it shocked them. 2 weeks before the scheduled family meeting, fate handed me an opportunity one never could have planned for. Marcus came home from work early, claiming he felt sick. But instead of going to bed, he got a phone call that made him suddenly feel much better. "I have to go into the office," he told me. "Emergency client meeting." I watched him leave, then called David to have him followed. As expected, Marcus went straight to the apartment where Jessica was waiting for him. But this time was different. This time, they had visitors. My parents were there. And Sarah. All of them together in the apartment I was paying for, probably planning how to break the news of Marcus's sudden desire for a divorce. David's photos from that night showed all 5 of them sitting around a table covered with documents. They looked serious, conspiratorial. They were planning their final move against me. What they didn't know was that their meeting had given me the perfect guest list for their destruction. The stage was set. The players were in position. All I had to do was wait for the right moment to bring their house of lies crashing down around them. I just never imagined that moment would come at Marcus's funeral. 3 days before the family meeting I'd scheduled, everything changed in a way I never could have anticipated. Marcus had been acting strangely all week, more distracted than usual, taking whispered phone calls, coming home with a guilty expression that made my stomach turn. I suspected they were planning to ambush me at our meeting, maybe present me with divorce papers or some rehearsed confession designed to minimize their guilt. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when I heard Marcus's phone ring. He was in the living room helping Lily with her homework, and I heard him answer with his usual professional tone. "Marcus Chin Martinez speaking." But then his voice changed completely. "What? Are you sure? When did this happen?" I moved closer to the doorway, pretending to organize the mail while I listened. "No, I understand. Yes, I can be there tomorrow morning. Thank you for calling." When he hung up, I found him staring at his phone with an expression I'd never seen before, pure panic mixed with something that looked almost like relief. "Everything okay?" I asked casually. He looked up, startled. "Oh yes, just a work thing. Nothing to worry about." But I could tell it was a lie, and this one was different from his usual deceptions. This lie was born of fear, not guilt. That night, Marcus barely slept. I felt him tossing and turning, getting up multiple times to check his phone. When morning came, he left earlier than usual, claiming he had meetings all day and wouldn't be back until late. I called David immediately and asked him to follow Marcus, but this time with special attention to who he met with and what they discussed. Something big was happening, and I needed to know what it was. David called me back 3 hours later with news that changed everything. "Elena, you're not going to believe this. Marcus didn't go to his office at all. He went straight to a criminal defense attorney's office downtown. He was there for 2 hours. My blood ran cold." "A criminal attorney? Are you sure?" "Positive. I recognized the firm. They specialize in white-collar crime. Financial fraud, embezzlement, that sort of thing." The pieces clicked together with horrifying clarity. The phone call, the panic in Marcus's voice, the sudden need for a criminal attorney. Someone had discovered the financial fraud my parents had been running, and Marcus was involved deeper than I'd realized. I called Margaret Walsh immediately. "I need you to check something for me. Has anyone else been investigating my family's finances recently? Government agencies, regulatory bodies, anyone?" "Let me make some calls," she said. "I'll get back to you within the hour." While I waited, my mind raced through the implications. If Marcus needed a criminal attorney, it meant the fraud was about to be exposed. But Marcus worked as an architect. How was he connected to my parents' restaurant fraud? Unless... I grabbed my laptop and started searching through the documents I'd gathered about my parents' business dealings. I'd been so focused on the stolen inheritance that I hadn't paid attention to other aspects of their financial arrangements. There it was, buried in a stack of loan applications I'd photographed from their office. Marcus Chin Martinez was listed as a co-signer on 3 major business loans, totaling over $800,000. His architectural firm was listed as collateral, along with our house. My husband hadn't just been having an affair with my sister. He'd been financially entangled with my parents' fraud for years, putting everything we'd built together at risk to fund their lies. Margaret called back with confirmation of my worst fears. Elena, the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit has been investigating a network of fraudulent restaurant businesses in the Denver area. It looks like your parents' company is part of a larger investigation. When? I managed to ask. The investigation has been ongoing for months, but they're moving to the arrest phase. I'm hearing raids could happen as early as next week. I hung up and sat in stunned silence. My elaborate revenge plan was about to be overshadowed by federal criminal charges. My family's lies were so extensive that they'd attracted the attention of the FBI. But as the initial shock wore off, I realized this actually played perfectly into my hands. They were all about to face consequences far more severe than anything I could have arranged myself. I called David back. I need you to document everything over the next few days. Where they go, who they meet with, how they're reacting to the pressure. I want a complete record of their behavior as everything falls apart. Then I made the most difficult decision of my life. I called Jessica. Elena. She sounded surprised to hear from me. We hadn't spoken since our confrontation at the restaurant. We need to talk, I said. All of us. Tonight. I don't think that's a good idea, Marcus said. Marcus doesn't get to decide anything right now, I interrupted. Tell him and Mom and Dad that I know about the FBI investigation. Tell them we're meeting at the restaurant at 8 p.m., or I go to the agents myself and tell them everything I know about the financial fraud and who is involved. The silence on the other end was deafening. Finally, Jessica whispered, "How do you know about that?" I know about everything, Jessica. The affair, the money laundering, the fake business loans, all of it. The only question is whether we handle this as a family or whether I let the FBI figure it out themselves. That evening, I walked into my parents' restaurant to find the most pathetic gathering I'd ever witnessed. My parents sat hunched over a table in the back corner, looking older than I'd ever seen them. Jessica was pale and shaking, her usual confident demeanor completely shattered. Marcus couldn't even look at me, staring at his hands like a guilty child. Sarah was notably absent, which told me she was smart enough to distance herself when things got serious. So, I said, taking a seat across from them. Who wants to explain how my husband became involved in federal money laundering charges? The silence stretched for a full minute before my father finally spoke. Elena, we never wanted you to find out like this. Find out what, Dad? That you stole my inheritance? That Marcus has been sleeping with Jessica for 2 years? That you've been running a criminal enterprise and using my marriage to legitimize it? My mother started crying, but I felt nothing but cold satisfaction watching her tears. We were trying to protect you, she said through her sobs. Protect me? By stealing from me and lying to me and making me an unwitting accessory to federal crimes. Marcus finally looked up. Elena, I know this looks bad, but I was trying to help your family. They were in trouble, and I thought I could help them restructure their debt. By committing fraud. I asked coldly. By putting our house up as collateral for their fake business loans? By having an affair with my sister while you were supposed to be helping them? The affair just happened, Jessica said desperately. We didn't plan it. No, but you planned everything else, didn't you? The fake expansion, the stolen inheritance, the elaborate lies to keep me in the dark while you destroyed my life piece by piece. My father cleared his throat. Elena, we know we made mistakes. Mistakes? I laughed bitterly. Dad, the FBI is about to arrest all of you. This isn't a mistake. This is a criminal conspiracy that you dragged my husband into. What do you want from us? My mother asked quietly. I looked around the table at their frightened faces and felt a surge of power unlike anything I'd ever experienced. I want you to understand that you're all going to prison. I want you to know that I'm not going to help you, bail you out, or provide alibis. And I want you to remember that you brought this on yourselves. I stood up to leave, then turned back one final time. Oh, and Jessica? You can have Marcus. Enjoy explaining to your children someday why Daddy went to federal prison. 3 days later, The FBI raids began. I was at home with Lily when the news broke. We were having breakfast when my phone started buzzing with notifications. Local news outlets were reporting on a major financial fraud investigation involving several Denver restaurant chains. Federal agents arrested 5 individuals known in connection with a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme involving fake business expansions and loan fraud, the news anchor reported. Among those arrested were Robert and Patricia Chin, owners of the Chin Restaurant Group, along with their daughter Jessica Chin and architect Marcus Chin Martinez. Lily looked up from her cereal. "Mommy, why is Daddy on TV?" I took a deep breath, knowing this moment would define how my daughter remembered this day for the rest of her life. "Daddy made some bad choices, sweetheart. He's going to have to go away for a while." The next few hours were a blur of phone calls, reporters at my door, and neighbors gathering in small groups to whisper about the scandal that had erupted in our quiet suburban neighborhood. Sarah called once, but I let it go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to hear her pathetic attempts at justification. David called with updates throughout the day. "They got everyone except Sarah," he reported. Looks like she was smart enough to distance herself when she realized how deep this went. By evening, the full scope of the fraud was being reported on every local news station. The Chin Restaurant Group had stolen over $2.3 million from investors and creditors through false business reports and fake expansion plans. My parents, Jessica, and Marcus were all being held on federal charges that could result in decades in prison. But the most satisfying part was watching their carefully constructed reputations crumble in real time on social media. Marcus's architectural firm released a statement distancing themselves from his actions. Jessica's former friends were posting shocked messages about how they never would have suspected. My parents' remaining business partners were publicly denouncing their actions and claiming ignorance of the fraud. The people who had spent years judging me for not joining the family business, who had whispered about my simple, catering career while they lived their glamorous, fraudulent lifestyle, were now watching their world collapse on live television. Over the next few weeks, more details emerged that made their betrayal even more calculated than I'd realized. The affair between Marcus and Jessica had begun specifically because they needed someone with legitimate business credentials to help legitimize their fraud scheme. Marcus's reputation as a successful architect made him the perfect co-signer for their fake business loans. They'd used me as cover for their crimes, letting me believe I was part of a loving family while they systematically stole from me and planned to abandon me once they'd extracted everything of value from our marriage. The private investigator found even more evidence during the weeks following their arrest. Marcus had been planning to divorce me and marry Jessica as soon as the final phase of their fraud was complete. They'd already picked out a house in another state where they planned to start over with their stolen millions. My inheritance wasn't just collateral damage, it was startup capital for their new life together. As the legal proceedings unfolded, I watched from the sidelines with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. These were people I'd loved, people I'd trusted completely. But they'd made their choices, and now they were facing the consequences. The most poetic justice came when their assets were seized to pay back their victims. The luxury cars, the renovated house, Jessica's designer wardrobe, the secret apartment, all of it was gone. They were facing trial from jail cells, unable to afford the high-powered attorneys they'd assumed their stolen money would buy them. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding my life with a clarity I'd never had before. My catering business was thriving. The scandal had actually brought me more clients who admired how I'd handled the situation with dignity. Lily and I were closer than ever, and I was finally free from the toxic dynamics that had poisoned my family relationships for years. The house was entirely mine now. Marcus's arrest had voided his claim to it, and the FBI had confirmed that my business and personal assets were separate from the criminal enterprise. I was finally financially secure in a way I'd never been while I was unknowingly married to a criminal. But the most satisfying moment came 6 months later, when Sarah finally worked up the courage to contact me directly. She showed up at my door on a rainy Tuesday evening, looking like she hadn't slept in weeks. "Elena, we need to talk." I let her in, curious to hear what she could possibly say that would justify years of betrayal. "I know you hate me," she began, "but I need you to understand that I was trying to protect you." I almost laughed. Protect me? By helping my husband cheat on me? By trying to minimize the damage when it all came out, she said desperately. I knew it was wrong, but I thought if I could control how you found out, maybe I could help you through it. "So your solution was to help them lie to me more effectively." Sarah broke down completely then, admitting that she'd been terrified of losing our friendship and had convinced herself that enabling their lies was somehow better than forcing them to tell the truth. As I watched her cry, I realized that this was the moment I'd been waiting for without knowing it. Not just to see her remorseful, but to understand that her betrayal had actually been the most pathetic of all. My family had been motivated by greed and lust. Sarah had been motivated by pure cowardice. "I can never forgive you," I told her calmly. "Not because what you did was worse than what they did, but because you had so many chances to do the right thing, and you chose the easy path every single time." She left that night, and I never saw her again. But I heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd moved to another city, unable to face the social consequences of her role in the scandal. As their trials approached, I was contacted by federal prosecutors who wanted me to testify about the financial aspects of the fraud. I agreed immediately, knowing that my testimony would help ensure they faced the full consequences of their actions. The trials were scheduled for the following month, and I was looking forward to finally having my day in court. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. The call came at 2:47 a.m. on a Thursday in March. I was in that deep sleep that only comes after months of stress finally lifting, when the shrill ring of my phone cut through the darkness like a blade. "Mrs. Chin Martinez? This is Officer Rodriguez with the Denver Police Department. I'm calling about your husband, Marcus Chin Martinez." I sat up immediately, my heart racing. "What happened?" "Ma'am, your husband was involved in a single vehicle accident this evening. He was killed instantly. I'm very sorry for your loss." The words seemed to come from very far away. Marcus was dead. My cheating, fraud-committing, life-destroying husband was dead just 2 weeks before his trial was scheduled to begin. "Ma'am? Are you there?" "Yes, I managed." "What? How did it happen?" "He was driving on Highway 36 when his vehicle left the roadway and struck a tree. The investigation is ongoing, but initial reports suggest he may have fallen asleep at the wheel. He was released on bail yesterday and had been staying at a motel on the other side of town." After I hung up, I sat in my dark bedroom for a long time, trying to process what this meant. Marcus was gone. The man who had betrayed me, stolen from me, and planned to abandon me was dead. I waited for grief to hit me, or relief, or something. Instead, I felt strangely empty. The next few days were a blur of practical arrangements. As his legal wife, I was responsible for his funeral despite our impending divorce. I chose the simplest service possible at the funeral home closest to our house, more out of obligation than love. I called his work colleagues, sent notices to the local paper, and made arrangements for Lily to stay with a friend during the service. I did everything that was expected of a grieving widow, even though I felt more like I was planning a stranger's funeral. But as the day of the service approached, something strange happened. No one RSVP'd. Marcus's colleagues sent polite condolences, but didn't commit to attending. His old friends were notably silent. Even his extended family, who I'd contacted out of courtesy, failed to respond. The morning of the funeral, I called my parents' house. My mother answered on the first ring. "Elena." She sounded surprised to hear from me. "Marcus's funeral is today at 2 p.m., I said simply. "I thought you should know." There was a long pause. "Elena, we can't come. The lawyers have advised us not to have any contact with you until after the trials." "He's dead, Mom. The trial doesn't matter anymore." "I know, and I'm sorry for your loss." But Jessica is still facing charges, and any association with Marcus's family could complicate her case. Even in death, they were choosing self-preservation over basic human decency. What about Dad? He feels the same way. We're all very sorry, Elena, but we have to think about Jessica's future. I hung up and immediately called Jessica's phone. It went straight to voicemail. I tried my father's cell with the same result. Finally, I called Sarah. She answered on the third ring, her voice cautious. Elena? I heard about Marcus. I'm so sorry. Are you coming to the funeral? I asked directly. Another long pause. I don't think that's a good idea. Given everything that's happened, it might send the wrong message if I'm there. The wrong message to who? To everyone, Elena. People are watching how we all handle this situation. I can't afford to be associated with the scandal any more than I already am. The line went dead, and I stared at my phone in disbelief. Even Sarah, who hadn't been charged with any crimes, was abandoning me in my supposed moment of grief. That afternoon, I stood in the funeral home wearing a black dress I'd bought that morning, looking out at rows of empty chairs. The funeral director, Mr. Hensley, kept glancing at his watch and then at me with barely concealed pity. Mrs. Chun Martinez, he said gently, would you like to delay the service? Perhaps some people are running late. I looked around the empty room one more time. No family. No friends. No colleagues. Just me, Lily, who I decided to bring after all, and the most damning silence I'd ever experienced. No, I said firmly. Let's begin. As Mr. Hensley read generic words about Marcus's life, I realized that this moment was the most perfect revenge I could have ever imagined. My family had abandoned me so completely that they wouldn't even attend my husband's funeral. They'd chosen their illegal self-interest over basic human compassion, revealing the depth of their selfishness in the most public way possible. But more than that, Marcus's death had solved every practical problem his betrayal had created. As his widow, I inherited his share of our joint assets without having to go through a messy divorce. His life insurance policy, one he'd never changed despite planning to leave me, would secure Lily's future. His architectural firm, wanting to distance themselves from the scandal, offered to buy out his partnership at full value. Most importantly, his death meant that the focus of the remaining trials would shift entirely to my family. Without Marcus to share the blame or provide testimony about who initiated the fraud, my parents and Jessica would face the full weight of federal prosecution alone. After the service, as I walked out of the funeral home with Lily, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: peace. Not because Marcus was dead, but because his death had finally revealed the true character of everyone who had betrayed me. They had chosen themselves over me so completely that they couldn't even manage basic human decency in what they believed was my darkest hour. That level of selfishness would be remembered by everyone who witnessed it long after their trials were over. 3 weeks later, my parents and Jessica were convicted on all charges. Without Marcus to corroborate their claims that he had initiated the fraud, their defense collapsed entirely. My father was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. My mother received 8 years. Jessica, as the youngest and least culpable, got 5 years. The local media covered their sentencing extensively, and in every article, there was a mention of how none of the family members had attended Marcus Chun Martinez's funeral, leaving his widow to grieve alone. The image of me standing solitary in that empty funeral home became symbolic of their heartless abandonment of family loyalty. Sarah lost several clients after her role in the deception became public knowledge. She eventually left Denver entirely, though I heard she struggled to rebuild her reputation in her new city. As for me, I thrived in ways I never could have imagined while I was trapped in their web of lies. My catering business expanded into event planning and became one of the most sought-after services in Denver. Lily grew up understanding the importance of integrity and the consequences of betrayal. We built a life based on honesty and genuine relationships, something I'd never had with my birth family. The insurance money and Marcus's assets allowed me to establish a scholarship fund for children of incarcerated parents, helping kids who were innocent victims of their family's crimes, something I understood intimately. But the most satisfying outcome was watching karma work its magic in ways I never could have orchestrated myself. My family's abandonment of me at Marcus's funeral became their defining moment in the public eye. It was mentioned in every news story, every social media post, every conversation about their case. They had thought they were protecting themselves by staying away. Instead, they had created the perfect symbol of their moral bankruptcy. Their absence spoke louder than any testimony I could have given about their character. Looking back now, 5 years later, I realized that empty funeral home was exactly what I needed to see. It wasn't just Marcus's funeral, it was the death of my old life, my naive trust, my misguided loyalty to people who had never deserved it. Sometimes the universe delivers justice in ways we never could have planned. My family thought they were so smart, so calculating, so far ahead of naive little Elena. But in the end, their own selfishness became their downfall. They taught me that blood loyalty is earned, not given. That trust, once broken, can never truly be repaired. And that sometimes, the best revenge is simply allowing people to reveal who they really are. So, let me ask you, have you ever experienced a moment where someone's true character was revealed in a way that shocked you? When did you realize that someone you trusted had been playing a completely different game all along? Drop your stories in the comments below because I know I'm not the only one who's learned these hard lessons about family loyalty and betrayal. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about justice, karma, and life lessons learned the hard way. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that they're not alone in dealing with family betrayal, and that sometimes the best thing toxic people can do is remove themselves from your life. Thank you for listening to my story and for all your support. Remember, family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about the people who choose to stand by you when everyone else walks away. Choose your people wisely, trust your instincts, and never let anyone convince you that their betrayal is somehow your fault. Until next time, take care of yourselves and the people who truly deserve your loyalty.